I stood at the edge of the trail, rifle slung over my shoulder, orange vest still on, and my hunting permit clipped neatly to my front pocket. I was just getting ready to head back home when 4 HOA board members came marching down the dirt path like they were soldiers heading into battle. Behind them was a police officer, real one this time, not like their fake HOA security. "Mr. Walker," said the lead Karen, a wiry woman named Susan, with frosted hair and a clipboard as her weapon of choice. "You've been fined again. This is the 3rd time we've caught you hunting within HOA view." I blinked. "Within view?" "Yes," she replied smugly. "It disturbs the serenity of our community, and per page 72 of our bylaws." "I don't live in your HOA," I cut in, voice calm but firm. "This land is part of my ranch. I've owned it for 8 years. The cop looked unsure. He scratched his neck, clearly not thrilled to be involved. But Susan grinned and handed me a citation. "Consider this a warning. Next time it's $5,000. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just nodded, took the paper, and walked off. But as I turned back one last time to glance at the wide-open land behind them, land they used every weekend for hiking, yoga walks, and fancy photo shoots with their dogs, I smiled. Because they didn't know something important. That peaceful piece of land wasn't part of the HOA either. And by Monday morning, I'd quietly bought it from the old couple who owned it. Cash. Then I put up a 10-foot metal fence all around it, with a sign that said, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." The next weekend, a full crowd of HOA hikers showed up like usual and stopped dead at the fence line. The wailing began. But what really shocked them was who walked out from behind the fence holding the keys. Me. Let's rewind and tell you how this all started. Hi, my name is Jeremy Walker. I'm 42, a disabled Army veteran, and I live in a log cabin just outside a quiet lakeside town in North Carolina. I have a black lab named Boone, a rusted red Chevy I refuse to sell, and about 48 acres of wooded land that's been in my family for generations. After retiring from the service, I just wanted peace. Quiet. Maybe a little hunting in season, and enough room for Boone to run. That's all. I bought the property legally and fair. No HOA, no neighbors in sight. At least, that was the case until 3 years ago, when the land next to mine was turned into a luxury housing development. Lakeside Pines Estates. Fancy name, fancy prices, fancy people. At first, I didn't mind. I kept to myself. They stayed on their side. But it didn't take long before the complaints started. First, it was about Boone barking. Then, my truck, lowering the neighborhood value. Then they tried to say I wasn't allowed to keep my barn that close to the edge of their view. I laughed it off, until they started fining me. I kept telling them I wasn't in their HOA. They insisted I was adjacent, and that still counted under their visual disruption policy. Visual disruption. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Then came the incident that made everything worse. I'd just gotten my seasonal hunting tags legal and signed off. Boone and I took our usual morning route through my wooded trail and settled in one of our usual clearings. I bagged a deer around 6:45 a.m., all legal. But I guess one of the HOA members saw me from their deck with binoculars, and that's when Susan, the clipboard queen, led a brigade right up my land like they owned it. They said the sound of the shot scared their children. They said their community wasn't safe with guns around. And once again, they issued me a fine. Even after I showed my deed. Even after I showed my permit. Even after the sheriff himself said I had the right to hunt on my land. But it didn't matter to them. They made flyers. They put it on their community Facebook group. They labeled me the dangerous neighbor with a gun. Some even started whispering that Boone was aggressive and should be put down. Boone. The same dog who lets birds land on his nose. It broke something in me. Not my spirit. No, that was fine. But something about their smugness, their arrogance, the way they used rules like weapons instead of kindness or understanding. So I started asking questions. Who owned the open patch of land between my cabin and the start of Lakeside Pines? The one with the winding trail, the scenic bench, and the wildflowers everyone used for Instagram? Turns out it was owned by an elderly couple named Martin and Judy Talbot. They'd bought it decades ago but had moved to Arizona to be near their daughter. They didn't even know the HOA had been using the land for free. I called them. I was respectful. I offered a fair price. They accepted. No fuss. And that's how I became the owner of the land that served as the HOA's favorite hiking route, yoga field, and weekend hangout. I didn't tell anyone, not right away. Instead, I watched. I let them do their weekend walks, their loud parties, their fake nature retreats, and I quietly got permits, surveyors, zoning papers, security cameras. Then, on a cold Friday morning, I put up the signs, private property, entry forbidden. And the metal fence? It went up overnight. I made sure of that. So when Susan and her crew showed up Saturday morning, sun visors on, yoga mats under their arms, pumpkin spice in hand, they froze. And when I stepped out from behind the gate, smiled and locked it behind me with a heavy clunk, they finally realized they had messed with the wrong neighbor. I hadn't even spoken yet when Susan stomped forward. "You can't do this. This land is public." "No, ma'am," I said, holding up the deed. "It's mine now." Their jaws dropped. But we've used this trail for years." "And that was kind of the Talbots," I said. "But they sold it, and I'm not the Talbots." Boone barked once, tail wagging beside me. The silence was thunderous. And just when I thought Susan might faint from rage, something even more dramatic happened. One of their HOA board members collapsed right there at the fence line, flat on the grass, out cold. Chaos broke loose. People screamed. Someone called 911. Susan knelt beside him, slapping his face and yelling his name, "Paul, Paul," while I stood there, stunned. The ambulance sirens came fast. Red and blue lights flickered against the trees as paramedics rushed over the grass to reach Paul, the HOA treasurer who'd collapsed at the gate. He was a round-bellied man with a too-tight golf shirt and sunburned cheeks, and at that moment, he looked pale and shaken as they checked his pulse. I stepped back respectfully. I wasn't heartless. I didn't want anyone to get hurt, just to be left alone. Susan, however, shot me a look like I was the devil himself. "This is your fault," she barked at me, wiping tears from under her sunglasses. This fence, this whole scene, you pushed him too far." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't force him to hike. Didn't force you to break onto private land for the past 2 years either." Her mouth opened to argue, but one of the paramedics cut in. "Ma'am, if you want to help, step aside, we need space." And just like that, Susan was silenced. They loaded Paul into the back of the ambulance and drove off, the wheels crushing the frost-covered grass. The rest of the HOA crew, about 15 of them including the nosy dog lady who always took pictures of Boone, stood in awkward silence. I took one last look at them and said, "I'm not trying to be cruel, but y'all made your choice when you decided to come after me for something that wasn't your business." Then I turned, locked the fence gate, and walked back toward my cabin with Boone trotting behind. But I knew. This wasn't over. By Monday morning, my inbox had exploded. 37 emails, 4 voicemails, 2 printed letters stuffed into my mailbox, even though we all had digital boxes now. The HOA had declared war. They called it an attack on community peace. Claimed I'd closed off natural space that belonged to everyone. They even filed a petition with the county demanding I reopen the hiking trail. I was sitting at my cabin's kitchen table, sipping coffee and going through the paperwork when Boone barked loudly from the front porch. I walked out. There, standing right outside my gate, were 2 HOA board members, Cliff and Jessica, holding clipboards. "Morning," I said. Calm, just like always. Jessica forced a smile. "We were hoping to speak with you, Jeremy," Cliff added. "Just a quick talk, no lawyers." I raised an eyebrow and leaned on the porch railing. "Go on." Jessica stepped forward. We think there's been a misunderstanding. That patch of land has always been part of our walking loop. And Paul, he's still recovering from the stress. This whole thing it's been tough on all of us. You mean tough because you lost something you didn't own? I asked. Cliff sighed. Look, man, we've had some strong feelings back and forth. But what if we work something out? Maybe a lease? We pay you monthly. You let us use the trail like before. We maintain it. I tilted my head. And dropped the fake fines about my hunting? Jessica hesitated. We could talk to Susan. I cut her off. Nah. Their faces fell. I don't trust people who weaponize rules to hurt others. And let me be clear. What you did to me? The flyers? The community posts about me being armed and dangerous? You didn't just try to shame me. You tried to isolate me. Boone let out a soft growl, as if to agree. Jessica's smile faded. Cliff looked like he wanted to punch a tree. I continued. So the trail's closed, and it'll stay that way. They turned and left without another word. Less than 24 hours later, someone tried to cut the fence. I heard it in the dead of night. Boone growled low and deep, pacing by the back door. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, my boots crunching on gravel. At the edge of the property, right near the bend where the wildflowers used to grow, I spotted movement. 2 figures, hooded. One was crouched, working on the fence with bolt cutters. The other held a flashlight, scanning nervously. They hadn't seen me yet. I raised my voice. You boys forget how to read a sign. They jumped like they'd touched an electric wire. One ran instantly, dropping the bolt cutters. The other? He froze, then stood slowly and turned toward me. It was Brian, Susan's teenage son. I couldn't believe it. Brian? I asked, stepping forward. Really? He looked guilty and scared, caught red-handed. It's not fair, he shouted. You ruined everything. We used to love that trail. And you think sneaking onto private property and cutting through a fence is going to fix that? I didn't mean to. I just wanted to get in. You just committed a crime, I said calmly. And I should call the sheriff. His face went pale. But I'm not gonna. You know why? He blinked. Because I remember what it's like to be your age. And I believe in second chances. His eyes widened. You do? Yeah, but this is your only one. I handed him the bolt cutters. Now go home. And tell your mom to stop sending her kid to fight her battles. He turned and ran. The next morning, I reinforced the fence with steel rods and added motion-triggered lights. No more games. But just when things seemed to be settling, something else happened. A certified envelope arrived. A lawsuit. The HOA was officially suing me for community obstruction, emotional distress, and loss of recreational assets. That was their next move. And this time they were serious. The game had changed again, and now it wasn't about fences, trails, or flyers. It was about power, and they were about to learn that some veterans don't back down from a fight, especially not one they didn't start. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. The real fireworks are just getting started. The courthouse smelled like dust and lemon polish. It was the kind of building where you could hear every footstep echo through the halls, the kind where small-town disputes turn into big-time drama. I stood before the judge in my best jeans, a tucked-in flannel, and my cleanest boots. I wasn't trying to be flashy, just respectful. My lawyer, a sharp old guy named Milton Green, tapped his pen calmly as the HOA's attorney started reading their list of complaints. Your Honor, the attorney began with the voice of a man who practiced his speeches in a mirror. My clients are seeking remedy for emotional trauma, disruption of traditional access, and loss of a communal recreational space they've enjoyed for years. I leaned over and whispered to Milton. They make it sound like I bulldozed a playground. Milton smirked without looking away from the judge. Let them talk. They're digging their own hole. The judge, a woman named Judge Harmon, raised a hand. Let's get to the point. Who owns the land in question? The HOA attorney hesitated for a split second. That was my moment. Milton stood up, lifted a folder, and calmly handed over a copy of the deed. Your Honor, Mr. Walker purchased the land legally from the original owners, Martin and Judy Talbot, who had held the title since 1972. This is the deed, the recorded transaction, and the boundary survey. It is fully within his rights to post no trespassing signs and secure the property as he wishes. Judge Harmon took her time reviewing it. I watched the HOA members seated behind their lawyer, Susan, Cliff, Jessica, all shifting uncomfortably. After a minute, the judge looked up. So why, exactly, are you suing him for exercising property rights? The lawyer cleared his throat. Because his actions were intentionally aggressive, Your Honor. The fencing went up overnight. He's antagonizing the community. There's a pattern of hostility. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood up. Hostility? They fined me for hunting on my own land, labeled me a danger to their children, printed my face on flyers. They came after me. The courtroom fell quiet. Judge Harmon turned to me. Mr. Walker, please let your attorney speak for you moving forward. Sorry, ma'am, I said. I sat back down. Milton leaned in. Nice delivery. Keep the fire, just let me swing the axe. The rest of the session was full of back and forth, zoning codes, maps, drone footage, even HOA social media screenshots. Then came the surprise. The HOA's lawyer called Brian, Susan's son, as a witness. I stiffened in my seat. He looked uncomfortable walking to the front, suit too big for his shoulders, hair slicked back. Do you recognize this fence? The lawyer asked. Brian nodded. Yes. Do you recall an incident on Mr. Walker's land last week? Brian swallowed hard. Yes. Can you describe what happened? Silence. Then Brian's eyes shifted to me. He looked straight at the judge. I tried to cut through the fence. I was angry. But Mr. Walker, he didn't call the cops. He gave me a second chance. You could have heard a pin drop. Even Susan looked stunned. I did something wrong, Brian continued, and he didn't punish me. The rest of us, we treated him like an enemy, but he wasn't. The lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Judge Harmon tapped her gavel lightly. That's enough for today. I'll review the evidence and return with a decision. Outside the courtroom, I patted Brian on the shoulder as he walked past. Brave thing you did, I said. He gave a nervous smile. I meant it. But if I thought that was the end, I was wrong. The very next evening, I found the fence spray-painted. Redneck scum. Open our trail, you'll never be long. It was like they'd declared open war. Boone barked nonstop that night. I didn't sleep much. I scrubbed the fence at dawn, jaw tight, eyes burning. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want enemies. But I also wasn't going to roll over and beg for peace. I thought about my father. How he used to say, respect goes both ways, son. Give it till they spit on it. Well, they'd spit. So I called the county office. I had one more move to make, and the next morning, a fresh sign went up beside the gate. Coming soon, private veterans retreat, members only. Underneath, trespassers will be prosecuted. It wasn't just a warning anymore. I was done playing defense, but just as I walked back to the cabin, I saw movement near the edge of the woods, a shadow darting behind a tree, then another. I grabbed my binoculars, 2 men, cameras in hand, taking photos. They weren't from the HOA, they were from a local news crew. And the next day? My face was on the morning broadcast. Veteran blocks public land in community dispute. And suddenly, it wasn't just the HOA anymore. The whole town was watching. The camera zoomed in on my face, sunburnt, tired, surprised. I was standing behind the gate with Boone beside me when the photo was taken. And now, there it was, on the morning news, plastered across every local station and shared over Facebook like wildfire. Veteran closes off community trail. Town divided. I stood in my kitchen, coffee going cold in my hands, watching the segment play out. The reporter stood just outside my fence. Lakeside Pines residents say the sudden closure of this popular trail has disrupted their daily lives and traditions. The land, recently purchased by retired Army veteran Jeremy Walker, has been fenced off after months of tension with the Homeowners Association. I changed the channel. Boone let out a low growl and sat at my feet. I reached down and scratched behind his ear. "They want to paint me as the villain," I said. "Fine, let 'em." But deep down it burned. They didn't show the part where I gave a teenager a second chance, or the part where the HOA tried to bully me with fake fines, or the damage they caused by treating my land like a public playground. By noon, I had 5 reporters knocking on my gate. One even flew a drone over the property. I called the sheriff's office. "Sheriff Marks," I said, "I got media harassing me, drones flying over my home, and trespassers trying to sneak through the back trail. You gonna do something about this?" He sighed into the phone. "I saw the news, Jeremy. I'm sending a deputy. We'll file it as harassment. You hang tight." True to his word, a cruiser rolled up an hour later. Deputy Rachel Perez, a no-nonsense Latina with mirrored shades and a buzz cut, stepped out. "Mr. Walker," she greeted me, "you're having one hell of a week. You have no idea." She took a report, warned the reporters to stay on the road, and gave me a direct line for future disturbances. "You're within your rights," she reminded me. "Let 'em scream into the wind." It helped. A little. But the real blow came 2 days later. My lawyer, Milton, called me. "You might want to sit down," he said. "Judge Harmon ruled on the HOA's case." I gripped the phone tighter. "Hit me." "She ruled in your favor. Case dismissed. HOA overstepped. She even mentioned the boy's testimony in her closing statement. You're in the clear." I breathed out for the first time in weeks. "So it's over?" "Legally? Yes. But socially? Brace yourself. You've rattled their little kingdom." He wasn't wrong. By the next morning, HOA members were posting on Nextdoor and the community bulletin board. They called for a boycott of any business that supported me. They told neighbors not to wave if they saw me in town. Even my grocery store cashier, Linda, seemed colder than usual. She didn't say it, but I could feel it. That kind of silence cuts deeper than words. But it wasn't all bad. That same afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, there stood Brian again. He held a paper bag and a small thermos. "My mom doesn't know I'm here," he said quickly. I looked at the bag. "What's this?" "Chili and coffee. Homemade. I wanted to say thank you. Again. For not turning me in. For being decent when no one else was." My chest tightened. "Come in," I said. He sat on the porch with Boone curled at his feet, sipping coffee like a grown man. We talked about school, football, life after the military, and for a moment, the noise faded. The judgment, the cameras, the angry emails, it all went quiet. That moment mattered. But peace never lasts long when you're dealing with people who hate losing. Later that night, I was reviewing some game camera footage from the edge of my property. Just routine to make sure no animals or trespassers had slipped through the back trails. But what I saw made my heart stop. 3 figures, dressed in dark clothes, hooded. One of them carried a large metal canister. Another had a match. They were pouring gasoline near the brush, trying to burn the trail. Arson. I jumped to my feet, called 911, and bolted out the door with Boone barking furiously at my side. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the porch and sprinted toward the gate. By the time I got to the fence line, I could already smell the fuel. One corner of dry leaves had caught fire, a small blaze, but fast-moving. Boone barked loud enough to scare the devil. The men ran, one tripping over his own feet and tumbling into a ditch before scrambling away. I emptied the extinguisher, stamping out the last sparks with my boots. Sheriff Marks and the fire department arrived 10 minutes later. "I've seen a lot in this town," he said, scanning the scorched ground. "But this is something else." They found the gas can, with Cliff's fingerprints. Yes, HOA board member Cliff. The same man who had tried to lease the trail from me. The same man who said, "Let's work something out." They arrested him the next morning. And just like that, the whole story flipped again. Reporters came back. This time the headlines read, HOA, arson, attempt on veterans' property, arrest made. People who'd given me dirty looks were suddenly waving again. Cars honked when I walked Boone near town. Linda from the grocery store slipped a free candy bar into my bag. But I wasn't celebrating. Because as the firemen left, and the crowd cleared, and the quiet crept back into the woods, I found something else near the gate, tucked inside a sealed envelope. No name, no return address, just one typed sentence on a piece of paper. This isn't over. I held the letter in my hand long after the sun had disappeared behind the trees. This isn't over. 6 little words, no signature, no name, just quiet, calculated menace. Boone sat by the gate, ears perked, eyes scanning the woods. He sensed the tension. I did too. My land was peaceful, sure, but that kind of peace had edges now. It didn't feel safe. It felt watched. The next morning I went straight to the sheriff's office and handed over the envelope. Sheriff Marks frowned as he read it. Anonymous threats after an arson attempt? That ain't just HOA drama anymore, Jeremy. That's criminal. He bagged the letter for fingerprints and told me to keep an eye out. Call us the second you see anything weird. I nodded, but I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting, so I upgraded my cameras, added heat sensors, motion tracking, and infrared night vision. I even installed floodlights that lit up the backwoods like a stadium every time something moved past the boundary. And then I made a call, not to a cop, not to a lawyer, to my old unit buddy, Hank. Hank Thompson was a stocky, broad-shouldered guy from Mississippi who used to be a scout sniper. After the military, he'd gone into private security and owed me a favor or two. "Jer," he said on the phone, "I thought you were done with this kind of stuff." I was, I told him. But apparently retirement ain't as peaceful as advertised. He arrived 2 days later in a matte black pickup with 3 duffel bags and a German shepherd named Roscoe riding shotgun. He stepped out of the truck and looked around. "You got yourself a nice setup here, shame about the neighbors." I gave him the rundown, what the HOA had done, the arson, the letter. Hank just nodded. "You think it was Cliff?" "I think Cliff was dumb enough to act. But this feels different, personal, calculated." We got to work, mapping out my perimeter, installing hidden trail cams, and setting up a few pressure-triggered alarms. Hank slept in the spare room. Roscoe and Boone hit it off instantly, running around like they'd known each other forever. For 3 days, things stayed quiet. Too quiet. Then, on the 4th night, the sensors tripped at 2:14 a.m. Boone and Roscoe both growled low, noses at the door. Hank was already dressed, rifle in hand. I grabbed the flashlight and we moved like ghosts through the trees. It didn't take long to find the source. Someone had broken through the back fence, not cut, but dug under it like a burrow. They were already inside the property. We moved slow, flanking the area, and then I spotted him. A man in all black, kneeling near the hiking trail, planting something into the ground. Hank lifted his rifle. "Don't move!" he shouted. The man jerked and tried to run, but Boone darted forward with a speed I hadn't seen since he was a pup. He barked so loudly it echoed through the trees. The guy froze. I grabbed him by the shoulder and yanked him around. It was Jacob Miller, the HOA president. I stared at him in disbelief. "You?" His eyes were wild. "You ruined everything." "What is this?" Hank asked, picking up the object Jacob had been planting. It was a spike strip. He was trying to sabotage the ATV trail on my property, the same trail I used to check fence lines. Hank looked at me. "Could have shredded your tires, could have flipped you over, in the middle of nowhere." Jacob squirmed. "You took away our peace. That trail was ours. You can't just block us out like that." "I didn't take anything," I said, stepping back. "You never owned that land. You just felt entitled to it." We called the sheriff. Sheriff Marks personally came down with 2 deputies, shaking his head the whole time. "You HOA folks have officially lost it," he muttered. Jacob was cuffed and taken away in silence. The next morning, the town woke up to another headline: HOA president arrested for trespassing and attempted property sabotage. This time there was no spin, and the tide finally turned. People who had stayed quiet now reached out. Letters came in the mail. Thank you letters. One was from an elderly couple who said they'd been fined by the HOA for planting sunflowers outside of height regulation. Another was from a single mom who said they fined her because her kid's bike was left on the lawn one afternoon. Turns out, I wasn't the only one they'd bullied. I was just the first one to fight back and win. But just as things seemed to be calming down, something strange happened. Milton, my lawyer, called me again. "You've got to see this," he said. He sent me a document. It was a land purchase offer for my cabin. Someone wanted to buy my whole property for nearly twice its market value. But here's the kicker. The buyer was listed under a shell company. No name, no address, just a front, and a message typed into the offer letter: "Everyone has a price." They weren't trying to fight anymore. They were trying to buy me out, to erase me, to wipe away the whole problem with money. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because they truly didn't understand who they were dealing with. I didn't bleed for this country just to be bullied out of my land. I didn't rebuild my life after war to sell it off to cowards hiding behind lawyers and real estate tricks. They wanted a price? Well, I had a price, and they were about to find out. It wasn't for sale. What would you have done in Jeremy's boots? Let us know in the comments, because the final play is about to begin. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the printed offer letter like it was a bad joke. Everyone has a price. Not me. Not now. Not ever. I folded the letter neatly, walked over to the wood stove and tossed it in, watched it curl, blacken, and vanish. But I wasn't stupid. That kind of offer wasn't just business. It was a message, a threat disguised in politeness. They were done trying to bully me with fines and lawsuits. Now they wanted to erase me by waving money around. Money with strings tied so tight they'd choke the life out of my land. I knew what they were up to. They didn't just want the trail back, they wanted me gone. Hank agreed. They're rattled, desperate. This is what happens when snakes run out of places to hide. We doubled down on our security setup. Hank set new traps, I reinforced the outer gate with steel bracing, and we installed an extra camera near the southern creek where the fencing was weakest. I even started sleeping lighter. Boone, too. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Until one night Hank nudged me awake around 2:30 a.m. "Movement," he said. "South perimeter, multiple heat signatures." I slid into my boots and jacket without a word, grabbed my flashlight and followed him out. Boone stayed at my heel, alert and silent. Roscoe flanked us on the other side. We crept through the woods like shadows, ducking behind trees, avoiding dry leaves. Then we saw them. 4 men, black hoodies, no HOA badges, no signs of official anything, just gloves, flashlights, and wire cutters. One of them held a fuel can again. They weren't just trespassing. They were trying again, to set my land on fire, to destroy the trail completely, make it worthless so I'd cave and sell. I stepped forward from the trees. "I don't think y'all understand the word private," I said, flashlight aimed straight at their faces. They froze. Hank stepped out beside me, rifle lowered but ready. Boone and Roscoe barked from both sides, circling them slowly like trained sentries. "Don't move," I said calmly. One of them did. He turned and ran. We didn't chase him. But the other 3? They dropped everything and raised their hands. It wasn't courage. It was fear. I called the sheriff. Sheriff Marks and Deputy Perez arrived within 15 minutes. Once again, I found myself standing under floodlights, handing over another group of criminals from the same group that once handed me a hunting fine on my own land. It was getting ridiculous. Turns out 2 of the men weren't even HOA members. They were hired contractors. paid under the table to clean up my trail. Marks was furious. This isn't just HOA nonsense anymore, he told me. This is organized. This is criminal. They were charged with attempted arson, trespassing, and conspiracy to commit property damage. And with that, the dam finally broke. The media swarmed again, but this time the headline wasn't about a veteran closing a trail. It was, HOA caught hiring contractors to destroy veterans' land. Social media exploded. People who had kept quiet were now speaking up online, in town hall meetings, and even in front of the HOA clubhouse with signs that read, "Leave Jeremy alone. This is not how we treat veterans. This trail was never yours." Then came the real bombshell. One of the arrested contractors flipped, testified under oath that Susan, the same clipboard-wielding HOA queen, was the one who paid them in cash. And just like that, the walls came crashing down. Susan was arrested on charges of conspiracy, reckless endangerment, and obstruction of justice. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, but it was already too late. The county dissolved their power over anything outside the formal HOA lots. Their budget was frozen, their leadership removed. Lakeside Pines HOA was effectively dismantled. People celebrated like it was the 4th of July. Some brought pies to my gate. Others brought thank you cards. The single mom with the bike story came by with her daughter to say, "Thank you for standing up when the rest of us were scared." I shook hands, smiled, but part of me still didn't rest. Because power like that, abuse like that, doesn't disappear. It hides, waits, tries to grow back stronger. So I made a decision. I took that land, the one I'd closed off to protect, and I turned it into something better. I partnered with a local nonprofit and officially registered the space as Freedom Trail, Private Veterans Healing Grounds, accessible only by veterans and their families, a place for peace, reflection, and healing. No politics, no HOA drama, just nature, respect, and freedom. At the entrance, I placed a wooden sign with a quote carved deep into the grain. Not everything has a price. Some things are paid for in blood, sweat, and silence. It wasn't just for me. It was for every person who ever got pushed around by people in power. Every veteran who came home and wanted peace but got dragged into another kind of war. Every neighbor who ever felt too small to fight back. The trail is quiet now, but every time I walk it with Boone, I feel it. The strength that came from standing my ground. And if I had to do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing. Except maybe I'd build the fence taller from day one. Thanks for watching. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you've ever had HOA drama, or stood your ground when no one else would, drop your story below. We want to hear it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories.